23 Lemon Racing and Front Row are still planning to expand in 2025 despite the lawsuit going on, and Kroger will be leaving JTG Doherty to go to RFK Racing, and ownership shaking up over JTG Doherty for 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on those really quickly. We're getting by talking about Yellowwood, as it was announced earlier today that Yellowwood has signed an extension with Talladega to be the entitlement sponsorship of the Fall Talladega race. This is a multi-year deal. Yellowwood has been the main sponsor of the Talladega Fall race, I believe, since 2020 or 2021. So it's really awesome to see they're going to be continuing their partnership going into 2025 and also in 2026. Really exciting stuff nonetheless, and glad to see Yellowwood will continue working with NASCAR going forward. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Talladega Spring Race, as they will have a new title sponsor for 2025. The race will be called the Jack Link's 500. This is a really cool big sponsorship. Jack Link's one of the biggest beef jerky brands out there, one of the biggest snack brands out there, is coming in to work with NASCAR. This is really huge and really exciting to see for Talladega. I like the new change. Obviously, Geico is leaving the sport at the end of the year, which is why Jack Link's is coming into play. I think it's really exciting stuff nonetheless, and really cool to see that Jack Link's is going to be coming in to work with the Talladega Spring Race starting in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 2024 winners. With Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning his first NASCAR Cup race of 2024, he becomes the 18th different winner of the 2024 season. It is noted by Jeff Gluck that we are very close to tying the record. One more winner will tie the record, which I think that record currently goes to 2001. We had 19 different winners throughout the season. It is really incredible to see, despite that there's been domination by Hendrick and Gibbs in those teams this year, you still have had teams like JTG Doherty Racing. I also think I saw Asteroid Potus as well. There's been a different team that's won since coming back from the Olympic break. RCR, 2311, Hendrick Motorsports have all gone to victory lane, same with JTG. I think it's really exciting and incredible stuff, and pretty wild to see we've had 18 different winners so far in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Talladega crash. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race earlier today, you saw the big one that took place. We have a new record for most cars involved in a modern-day NASCAR Cup Series crash in the history of the Cup Series. 28 drivers were involved with the big wreck, including Shane Van Gisbergen, Kyle Busch a little bit was involved, Chase Elliott, Austin Cindric, Joey Logano. Brad Keselowski got a little bit of damage in that. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who went on to win the race, he got caught up in the big wreck. This is the most I think we've seen in a wreck in all three series since the 2002 Aaron's 312, if I'm not mistaken. Almost whole field got collected in this wreck, which is absolutely wild. We all kind of knew it was going to happen. It's pretty wild nonetheless to see that almost whole entire field got collected in a wreck. It's very rare. You see this kind of stuff. Absolute wildness, absolute chaos, and pretty crazy to see that 28 different drivers were involved in the wreck. Pretty exciting stuff overall, and pretty wild stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Norm Benning. Now, Norm Benning did compete in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race on Friday night, and he is now the oldest driver to finish on the lead lap in a NASCAR Top Tier Series race. He at 72 years old, he finished in 21st position in the Craftsman Truck Series race. With him coming across the line, he is the oldest driver to finish on the lead lap, breaking his old record, which was at 71 years old last year. That is absolutely crazy. Norm Benning has been doing this for a very, very long time, and have basically be the oldest driver in NASCAR history to have a lead lap finish is pretty remarkable and absolutely incredible. Not even Herschel McGriff's got that, not even Morgan Shepherd's got that. So really exciting stuff. Pretty wild to see that for Norm, and pretty cool that Norm continues to hold and break records. Norm's been doing this for many, many years, since the 1980s and the 90s. So pretty good stuff for Norm. Congratulations to Norm Benning on having a new record. Pretty exciting for him, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Talladega Cup finish. Now, so far this year, we have seen a lot of close finishes. And once again, in the Cup Series race earlier tonight, we saw a new record for another record for the closest Cup finish. Today's race had 3 cars coming across the line, I believe, by about 0.2 seconds, if I'm not mistaken, or 0.02 seconds, and first and second only was across the line by 0.06 seconds. This is, I believe, the 4th or 5th closest finish in NASCAR Cup Series history, and 3 of the closest finishes so far this year have been in that top 10. Obviously, Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher's close finish, where they were only 1/1000 of a second in Kansas, and then, of course, I think it was like 6 or 7 1/1000 between the top 3 at Atlanta, and now you've got another amazing and fantastic finish. Yes, there was a lot of grid walk going on, among other things, but I still think it's pretty exciting stuff and pretty incredible to see. We continue to have new records broken and new records being broken. Pretty exciting and really wild stuff overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Biffle. Now, if you've been on social media throughout this week, I really haven't discussed this much on the channel, but Greg Biffle has been helping out a lot of people throughout the devastation in the hurricanes. If you've basically seen what's been happening, obviously this past week or so, we had Hurricane Helene, and Greg Biffle's been helping out with hurricane efforts. He's been helping a lot of people. He's been bringing in supplies, bringing in Starlink, among other things, and what Greg Biffle has been doing is absolutely incredible. And I saw Marty Smith, I believe, put this on Twitter, and he says that he should get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. I 100% agree. Greg Biffle should be getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom because what he's been doing right now is honestly incredible. And he should be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame just for this. What he's done for the contributions, among other things of the sport, have been incredible, and what he's doing outside of the sport is also very well as well. And to all the teams that have been helping out with the efforts, we thank you for that as well. Hendrick, 2311 Racing, Joe Gibbs has helped, then Carl Edwards has helped, and of course Greg Biffle has helped in a pretty major way. So it's really amazing stuff to see what Greg Biffle's doing. There's a lot of great people in this world, and Greg Biffle's no exception. He's an amazing human being, an amazing individual, and Greg Biffle's done a lot of great things, and great to see nonetheless that Greg Biffle is helping and bringing a lot to the table and helping the sport overall in pretty major ways, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andres Perez de Lara. As Andres Perez de Lara has won the 2024 ARCA Series Championship. He is the first Mexican-born driver to win the ARCA Championship. Now, I want to give him his flowers because he does deserve the championship, but he didn't win a single race in ARCA this year and only led 20 laps throughout the whole entire year. Most of the year was dominated by 2 drivers, William Sawalich and Connor Zilisch. But they couldn't run the full season because both drivers, you guessed it, had not turned 18 years old till now. I get that he deserves the championship, but ARCA really needs a wake-up call from this because while it's cool to see Andres Perez win the championship, there's a lot of work that really needs to be done and a lot of growth that needs to be done with ARCA. There's no reason the guy that can't win a race in ARCA should really be the champion. The guy who finished second was LeVar Scott, really cool, but the only reason he really won the championship was because he ran every single race. If he had not run every single race, he wouldn't have won the championship. So congratulations to Andreas, but seriously, I don't personally think that he was most deserving driver of the year. Congratulations on the championship. He's deserving because of the system we have, but he is not the most deserving driver to win the championship, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brian Campy. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Brian Campy has signed as technical director of Legacy Motor Club. Brian Campy, for those who are unaware and do not know, has been working with Hendrick Motorsports for many years and played a major role and was helping Kyle Larson in major ways during the Indianapolis 500 in 2024. He obviously has good friendship with Jimmy Johnson in the past, has been working at Hendrick for many, many years. This is a massive hiring for Legacy Motor Club, and I think Brian is going to bring a lot to the table, and I think we're already kind of seeing some of the work he's done. Eric Jones just got his first top 5 of the 2024 season in the Cup race at Talladega. And if he can come in there and really help up their program, that would be huge for the organization and the group. Legacy, it's no secret, has really struggled, and they've had a lot of turnover throughout the 2024 season. If they could just have consistency and keep Brian on here for a very long time, I think that could help their program going forward. But I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. Bringing him in is going to be massive, is going to be huge for them, and pretty awesome and great to see that they're bringing someone in who's got a lot of experience and knows what he's doing. I think Brian's going to do a really good job helping the organization, the program, and really happy to see that he'll be working to help their program grow throughout the rest of the year and going into 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Rose. As it was noted by Joseph Strigley and Ben Brascombe that Christian Rose, according to them, what was heard on the broadcast, he is expected to be joining the Truck Series full-time in 2025. However, they did not confirm exactly what team he'll be driving for in the 2025 season. Now, currently, Christian Rose is driven full-time for AIM Racing over the course of the last few years and has made select Truck Series, and I think he's also made an Xfinity start or two over the course of the last year or so. Now, Christian Rose, in my opinion, he's an okay driver, but he's not been amazing in ARCA this year. He's made a lot of mistakes, and I'm not exactly sure if he's ready to make the jump up to the Truck Series. I think there's a lot of drivers in lower series, especially in ARCA, that are not ready to make that jump up to the Truck Series for 2025. If you want my guess, one potential possibility is maybe AM Racing, maybe bringing back their Truck Series program. They haven't had that, I believe, at all in 2024. Obviously, Harrison Burton is running full-time in their Xfinity program. They kind of got rid of their truck programs to focus on their Xfinity program, which kind of struggled with Haley Deegan this year, a lot of the year, which is why they're bringing Harrison Burton in. My best guess is that could be the opportunity. I also think the Rayon brothers are another team that could be an option for next year. We don't know what they're doing at the moment for 2025. But if I were a betting man, that'd be one of the teams that I'd be looking at where Christian Rose could end up going in 2025. So it's very interesting nonetheless to see where Christian's going to go. I hope he can do a really good job because let's be real honest, like I said, he has not really set the world on fire this year. I hope he can do a really solid and great job and run up front and do good in the Truck Series next year. As a Truck Series is going to be losing some really good talent as they do move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, if you're on social media seeing the WeatherTech post, which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, you probably noticed a little something on the bottom corner of the Junior Motorsports car that Connor Zilisch is going to be driving next year. It looks like there is a new logo for Junior Motorsports going into 2025. When you look at the logo, it just looks very simplistic, kind of like Joe Gibbs Racing's icon they have for their Xfinity Series cars. I gotta say, I do like this new logo. Don't get me wrong, I like the current logo they have. I like the orange, I like the sleekness. I think it looks pretty good. But I also do like this logo for the simplicity reasons. And I'd have to imagine this is an announcement that is coming not too far down the road, judging by the fact they probably like this. And I think it does look pretty solid going into next year. And JRM's got a really strong lineup going into 2025. Connor Zilisch, Carson Quaffle, who was announced about a week or so ago. Obviously, they've got Sammy Smith coming back, who just won at Talladega. And you've got Justin Allgaier returning to the team next year as well. I do like this logo for sure. I think it does look really, really solid, and I think JRM did a pretty solid and great job on this logo. It kind of looks like it said the JGR logo they've got in their Xfinity program. I think it looks pretty decent for sure, and pretty cool to see that they will have a new logo going into the 2025 season. Really exciting stuff for sure, and it'll be very intriguing to see when they officially confirm this, but I'd have to imagine that this will be announced in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Williams. As Josh Williams confirmed earlier today that he will be spotting for Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilisch in 2025. Now, for those who are confused, there are two Josh Williams. There's a driver Josh Williams and there's a spotter Josh Williams. The spotter Josh Williams spotted for Ryan Blaney last year in 2023 when he, of course, won the championship with Ryan Blaney and has currently been spotting for Zane Smith in the NASCAR Cup Series this year. It seems like Josh Williams is under contract with Trackhouse Racing on the spotting side of things, and he's going to be working with two really strong drivers for next year. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen, who just got a top 15 earlier today at Talladega Super Speedway, who will be super competitive there and has been really good at road courses. I think working with him is going to be huge there, and he's going to be working with Connor Zilisch. Connor Zilisch, who I think has a lot of potential to win a NASCAR Cup Series championship one day, I think currently is the best prospect they've got in NASCAR currently at the moment right now, and I think he's done an excellent job moving his way up through the lower series at this point. I think this is really huge to bring him in. Again, I think this is massive to have him come in and work with both these drivers. Both very talented, two of the most popular drivers on the circuit right now. And nonetheless, I think it's really exciting and great to see that Connor Zilisch and Shane Van Gisbergen are going to have Josh Williams, who just won a Cup championship and also Truck championship 2 years ago, I believe. I think he's going to do a really excellent job and a solid job spotting for both these guys in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, we talk about the Denny Hamlin 2311 Racing lawsuit in just a little bit. But Kyle Larson was also speaking on the 2311 Racing lawsuit a little bit because he actually confirmed something that's been theorized over the last month. He says that High Limit is interested in bringing charters into their program starting in 2025. Though he does mention that they're not going to be as high key as the NASCAR Cup charters or IndyCar charters are going to be. They're not going to cost as much. This rumor that I have heard as a potential possibility coming up that the High Limit Series was looking to get charters. We have seen other series investing in charters. Like I mentioned with IndyCar, they've got charters going into 2025. It's unknown if they're going to have the litigation stuff coming into play in that series. But this doesn't shock me or surprise me, right? Kyle Larson, of course, competes full-time in the Cup Series, which has had charters now for almost a decade at this point. We'll have new litigation for the charters starting in 2025. And you've obviously got Larson, who wants to bring this in for way for teams to make money, though I don't think it's going to be as significant, and I think the racing will be the same. I don't know if locked-in spots are going to be a guaranteed thing for High Limit, considering High Limit continues to grow. They had a very successful year so far. I think some people are going to be very disappointed here that High Limit is bringing in charters, but it doesn't shock me or surprise me that they're looking at that at this point because obviously they want to make the moves they can to try to make money. That's what Kyle Larson wants to do. He's invested a lot of money into this, and he wants to grow the High Limit Series, and if he could bring in a way to bring that money in, I think that'd be really huge for the series. So nonetheless, really intriguing stuff for sure, and pretty cool, not cool, but pretty interesting to see that it looks like they are going to be bringing some sort of charter agreement starting in 2025 that could be coming in very soon, and maybe in the not so distant future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Fox once again. Now, I have been super critical of Fox on this channel over the course of the last couple of years. But the coverage on Friday afternoon might have taken the cake for one of the worst broadcasts I have seen in 2024. And even Breakard mentioned this in his video very recently as well. They had absolutely horrendous coverage at Talladega Superspeedway. From not interviewing the pole sitter who got his first career Truck Series pole, that being William Sawalich, to having terrible camera work throughout the whole entire event. They literally missed a whole entire wreck that was going on near the end of the event, where we saw Keith McGee just fly in there. They kept interviewing Jake Garcia. They were side by side doing a Craftsman truck commercial, and there was a big run that took place, and they didn't cut away from that commercial to go back and look at the racing product. I'm not expecting the Truck Series to have the greatest broadcast. We all know this. But I think we need to see at least better broadcasts than what we've been seeing. The Truck Series broadcast has just been going so downhill. Not even Adam Alexander can save it. Adam Alexander, I think, is a fantastic lead commentator. I think he's done overall an amazing and a really good job helping it. But I think you look at the broadcast and there just needs to be drastic changes. And with rumors of Adam Alexander looking to go to the CW next year, I am really worried about the future of the Truck Series going into 2025. I really hope they're looking to not have Jamie Little in there full time next year. But I would not be surprised or shocked if she's in every single race for the Truck Series. And they're not even at the racetrack. It's another big thing too. They're behind a little bit. They're not calling the races really that well. They've done absolutely an horrendous job. And there need to be some wake-up calls going into Fox's desk because right now they're just doing an absolute abysmal and a terrible job. And I've been critical of this for a very, very long time, but it really needs to change because what they're doing and how they're producing the broadcast is just not acceptable in my opinion. They need to change it. They need to get better. And right now they're just not doing a good job on that front. I know some will disagree, but I think the broadcast for Fox have been absolutely horrendous, and I think they've been bad, and they need to get better going forward. Otherwise, people are going to stop watching, and I think the ratings will go down if things don't change going forward, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney and Alex Bowman. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race earlier today at Talladega Superspeedway, you saw the first big wreck that took place coming to the end of stage number 2, Ryan Blaney and Alex Bowman were up front, battling for a potential stage win. Ryan Blaney had made a move to the outside, trying to make the move to get the stage win. And unfortunately, coming to the line, Ryan Blaney got a terrible push from Alex Bowman coming through the tri-oval. He went up to the track, he got squirrely and went really hard right up the racetrack, got into Shane Van Gisbergen a little bit, went right across the track, collected Ross Chastain, Joey Logano a little bit, and Denny Hamlin got involved, and Ross Chastain's day was over. After the wreck had taken place, Ryan Blaney had expressed a lot of frustration with Alex Bowman and was very frustrated with Alex Bowman after the race. Now, Alex Bowman also responded to this situation by taking a lot of responsibility and taking blame for the wreck and incident, basically saying it was my fault, I gave him a shitty push, and that was bad on me. I take complete responsibility for the incident and wreck. Now look, in this situation, I put blame on Alex Bowman for sure because he was definitely the one pushing, but he, to be fair, did have Kyle Larson right behind him, and I have to imagine the push that he was getting from Larson was really not helping this situation. And I also do understand why Ryan Blaney is upset and frustrated with Alex Bowman. It's still early in the race. I get we're coming to the end of the stage, but we also don't need to be that aggressive at that point of the race, right? So I can get that from Ryan Blaney's perspective. But I don't think it's all 1,000,000% Alex Bowman's fault. I think a lot of it definitely for sure is Alex Bowman's fault. There's no denying that. Which Bowman hasn't really made a lot of mistakes this year, right? So for him to make a little bit of mistake and get in the back of somebody is definitely a little bit wild on his side of things. But I can also understand Blaney's frustration a bit because Ryan Blaney, if you look over the years, he's taken some very nasty and severe hits, especially at super speedways. He is one of the super speed gods of the field, it seems like at this point. Has been good at Talladega, winning 3 times here, but he's also had some very nasty and big wrecks at super speedways, like Daytona last year, like some of the ones this year so far. He just hasn't been able to catch breaks on these big types of tracks, and at least for Ryan Blaney, because of the big incident that took place, Ryan Blaney is in a much better position going into the final races of this round, including at the Roval this week. But I think Ryan Blaney has every right to express his frustration. I don't 1,000,000% put blame on Alex Bowman, but I do think he is mainly the one at fault because he was the one, to be fair, that got into the back of him and caused the incident and wreck. I'm glad to see everyone was okay after the incident. There was no one severely hurt in that situation. No one was actually hurt. And I'm glad to see everyone was okay and everyone got out of the car. Ross Chastain was a little bit dazed after the incident. I'm glad someone took responsibility for the wreck, but I don't think it was 1,000,000% Alex Bowman's fault, but I do think he will probably blame himself a little bit for that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chevrolet. Now, we've talked about this story on the channel a lot recently, but Bob Pockrass kind of confirmed the same story that he's reported on a couple times. And according to what Bob has shown, this was from the WeatherTech announcement we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. If you look at the car is branded as a Chevy and not a Camaro. For the last 6 or 7 years since the Camaro has come into play, there's always been a Camaro sign on the car. Remember, the Camaro has gone out of production, and really at this point, it's unknown what they officially are going to do. Now, obviously, NASCAR can run the Camaro brand, and Chevy can run the Camaro brand if they want to, but kind of similar to what Dodge did when they kind of went away from some of their branding. They kind of changed the name just to Dodge. And obviously, we don't know what the future of Chevrolet is in NASCAR. Some have theorized maybe in the future that Chevrolet could leave the Chevy brand and GM could go over to the Cadillac brand, for example, because there's not going to be another Camaro that's going to be produced. The only one you really could go to probably is the Corvette, and the Corvette is going to be so aerodynamically advantaged, and it's going to have a massive advantage on these types of tracks that it's going to be unbeatable on every type of track if you bring it out there. So to be honest with you guys, I don't know what the future is for Chevrolet. There was a rumor about a secret test that was supposed to take place, but obviously nothing's come from that at this point, and no one really knows what's going on that front. Still, I think it's going to be very intriguing to see what happens and what Chevrolet does decide to do in regards to this, but it looks like there are some big changes coming down the road, and it's very intriguing nonetheless to see this, right? Because we've seen Camaro on the car now for nearly 7 to 8 years. Chevrolet's also been the most successful brand. Chevrolet's had massive wins. They've won nearly 900 races in the Cup Series at this point. They've dominated the Cup Series with the most wins so far this year, with the winningest manufacturer 2024 in all 3 series combined. I think that it's going to be very intriguing to see what they do decide to go with for the 2025 season. They're going to be using Camaro next year, it looks like, but I think it's very interesting to see that they won't be changing it up for next year and keeping some of the same branding they've had for a while at this point, and likely keeping that same Camaro brand going into the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, I also did a video on this story. It was confirmed after the race that Sam Mayer had failed post-race tech at Talladega and has unfortunately been disqualified after the crossing the finish line in 16th place. Now, why was Sam Mayer disqualified at Talladega? Well, the big reason is he failed in height. Unfortunately, the car was too low, I believe, in the rear of the car, and therefore, if you fail that side of post-race inspection, you get disqualified. After the race, he had been 10 points above the cutoff line, and now Sam Mayer is going to the Charlotte Roval this upcoming week, being 13 points below the cutoff line. Now, good news for Sam Mayer fans is Sam Mayer is the defending winner of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at the Charlotte Roval, and Sam Mayer is also a really good road course racer. The bad news is Shane Van Gisbergen and AJ Allmendinger are in the same race, and SVG is going into this race as the absolute favorite. And AJ Allmendinger has won the last 4 straight years, either in the Cup Series or the Xfinity Series at the Charlotte Roval. So he is going to be very tough to beat when we do get to the Charlotte Roval this upcoming week. But I do think Sam Mayer is going to be up front. But it's a really tough break for Sam Mayer, right? Because Sam Mayer has been up and down so far in the 2024 season. He's won 2 races so far throughout the year, but he's also been involved in some pretty big incidents and pretty big wrecks throughout the whole entire season. So I do feel bad, at least in a little bit of sense, for Sam Mayer and the things been going on with this number 1 team this year. But they've also put himself in his position. Now, to be fair to Sam Mayer, I'm not going to put full blame on Sam himself, because Sam's not the one who messes with the car. It's a team that messes with the cars, and they causes these cars to be in a position they end up being in. So I do feel bad for Sam Mayer here. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forward. We've seen some other disqualifications, but I think the last time we saw a DQ was when Corey Heim got disqualified for lug nuts, which I think is still one of the stupidest calls we've seen so far this year, where a driver got disqualified because they had not enough lug nuts on the car. That's such a stupid rule, if you ask me. It is a bad call, and that's why the single lug nut rule might be better for the Cup Series, even though they're trying to adopt that maybe for Xfinity in the future, maybe as a possibility. I don't know at this point, but I do think Sam Mayer is going to have a really tough road going forward, and it's very interesting nonetheless to see that Sam Mayer failed post-race tech, and I think it'll be very interesting to see how things play out when we get to the Roval and see how he'll play out. I think he's going to have to go for the win at this point, which I think is going to be really tough with SVG and AJ Allmendinger in the same race at the Charlotte Roval this year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the damaged vehicle policy. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega, the DVP and the tire issues came into play once again. So let's go to the end of the race. With 3 or 4 laps to go in this race, we had a really good battle up front between Austin Cindric and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Brad Keselowski and Joe Logano gave a massive push to Austin Cindric, which caused Austin Cindric's car to get squirrely. He got into Ricky Stenhouse Jr., causing a 28-car pileup, which is the biggest wreck in NASCAR Cup Series history. Not NASCAR altogether, but the biggest wreck in Cup Series history. Well, one of the biggest issues in the next-gen car is that when these cars lose all their tires, they become beach. And there were a lot of cars stranded on the bottom of the racetrack that just had flat tires, but needed a push to get back down to pit road. Chase Elliott was one of them. Chase Briscoe was another one. I believe Harrison Burton was another driver. And they got towed actually back to pit road. Despite putting on a red flag, they got towed back to the pits. There was a driver, though, that was clearly not very happy, and that was Josh Berry. Josh Berry was sarcastically calling out NASCAR's rules. He basically said they had Johnny Nemechek trying to kick up basically some rubber, I believe, on the track, trying to get back to the pits. And we all know Josh Berry last week. We talked about this, where Josh Berry got towed to the campground and his race was over. So how come did Josh Berry not get towed back to the pits where they could have put tires on with his car not being really damaged at all? But you're telling me Chase Elliott, Chase Briscoe, and Harrison Burton all can get towed back to the pits and can't continue going? Where is the consistency? Well, Elton Sawyer responded to the media in this situation and basically kind of said, oh, we don't know. We didn't know there were a lot of cars that were down there. We don't know why 30 cars were stuck. Well, Elton, you've got a car that when it gets stuck in the sand, in the grass, it gets beached because this car doesn't have a freaking inner liner. There has to be changes to the DVP, and the consistency of the DVP, it's not consistent at all. It's very inconsistent. And drivers and fans like myself have been super frustrated with DVP over the years. There is no reason that one guy should have been eliminated in one race and you have 3 other drivers that get to continue racing. Where is the consistency? Also, I don't think a driver that has flat tires should be eliminated from the race like Josh Berry was last week. And also, can we, like Joey Logano said, for the love of God, find a way to put inner liners in these cars? Because guess what the Xfinity and the trucks have? You guessed it, inner liners. I don't know why they had to make an 18-inch wheel on the next-gen car. Maybe shorten the wheelbase, maybe, so you can add an inner liner to the car. I think that would fix a lot of problems. That red flag and the caution, all that stuff was really, really frustrating, and I think it hurt the enjoyment of the race for me and a lot of fans that are watching. And NASCAR desperately needs to get it together on certain areas, and the DVP is one of those areas. They really screwed up, in my opinion, on a DVP. I know it's got good intentions. I know what NASCAR's intentions are. They don't want to bring out debris cautions all the time, which I completely understand, and that's fine and understandable. But at the same time, there is no reason, like I said, that certain cars should have been eliminated from the race and certain cars got to continue going. Just really uncalled for it to be this really just difficult, and it doesn't have to be this difficult. It shouldn't be this inconsistent, and NASCAR always seems to find a way to be inconsistent with the way they make rules and call rules overall. They've got to change stuff going up, in my opinion, because what they've been doing is just not acceptable, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson once again. Now on Friday, I believe the Supercars main account put out a tweet interesting about Kyle Larson once again. And according to what they reported, Kyle Larson is very interested in racing in the mountains and racing at Bathurst. I think they also mentioned that Kyle Larson is interested in maybe doing either the Bathurst 1000 or the Bathurst 12 hours. Now, Kyle Larson, of course, has raced in Australia and basically in that coast many, many times when it comes to sprint car racing. And Kyle Larson obviously has expressed interest in doing other forms of racing. One area, of course, is Formula One, maybe doing an open practice session with a bunch of Formula One drivers, but of course he would need an F1 super license in order for that to happen, which Kyle Larson, I don't believe, has enough super license points at this time to be able to do that. But Kyle Larson, we've seen a lot of drivers that have been interested in going over and running in supercars. Now, there is a wild card race that takes place in Adelaide, and we know Kyle Busch was super close to running that race at Adelaide, but unfortunately we got reports about a month or so ago that deal for him to run the supercar race unfortunately fell through. I think that team announcement that was supposed to happen was Kyle Busch running the supercar race, and unfortunately that fell through. But Kyle Larson, from what I have heard, is kind of the backup plan, which isn't a bad backup plan, by the way. Kyle Larson is one of the best drivers in the world. He always races everything, and everything gets behind the wheel. He is super competitive. Now, that being said, there's a lot of great drivers currently competing in supercars. Will Brown comes to mind. Brock Feeney comes to mind. Cam Waters comes to mind. There's a lot of amazing and great drivers that currently race in the supercar ranks, and I think Kyle Larson would definitely 100% for sure would have a major challenge if this was to happen. But I honestly really want to see this happen. I want to see Kyle Larson in the future get the chance and opportunity to go and race in the supercar ranks and get a chance to get behind the wheel of one of those cars. He's one of the best drivers in the world, and I think he's earned the right and opportunity to get a chance and opportunity at this. So we'll see if this ever ends up happening for Kyle Larson to do this, but I think it'd be pretty amazing and pretty awesome and amazing overall for this to happen. I think him running a supercar race, if he had the opportunity availability, I think it'd be pretty cool to happen. So I hope it does end up happening, and hope we do get to see Kyle Larson get the chance in the future to do one of these supercar races with one of these really strong teams and organizations, like maybe Erebus Racing or something like that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, we're going to talk about the WeatherTech announcement here in just a little bit. But it was reported by Peter Strada, who does a lot of work with Noah Sweet as well, and they're one of their media companies. And basically, Peter Strada reported that Trackhouse Racing is looking to potentially run the Rolex 24 in the not-so-distant future. And they're in preliminary talks to maybe run the Rolex 24 as early as 2025. We have seen Trackhouse Racing do a lot of big things and expand to different forms of racing. It is no secret that Trackhouse, of course, owns a MotoGP program with 2 drivers who've gotten podiums this year so far, and they've also expressed interest, like Justin Marks expressed interest, in maybe going to IndyCar and having an Indy 500 team, made for a driver like Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, if they were to run the Rolex 24 in the future, like 2025, what drivers could they get? Well, they do have 2 drivers very easily, especially if it's a GTP car, because in GTP, I believe you have to have 3 or 4 drivers to get to run this series. I think that they could easily get 4 drivers very, very quickly. The first driver is obviously Connor Zilisch. Connor Zilisch, one of the best road course racers out there, always forms extremely well. Won on his debut in NASCAR Xfinity Series and has been so dominant. And also, another big thing to know, he has won the Rolex 24 in the LMP2 class. So he'd be a perfect candidate and a perfect fit to run the Rolex 24. The second driver will be SVG, Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG, like Connor Zilisch, is an absolute amazing road course racer. And same with Connor Zilisch, he does have some experience in the Rolex 24, I believe, in the GT class when he was teammates with Cooper McNeil. I think him running the Rolex 24 would be absolutely amazing, and I think he'd be super fast and super competitive in the Rolex 24. So they need a third or fourth driver. Who could they also get? Kyle Busch, for example, would be a really good option. Kyle Busch, I think, in the past expressed interest in running the Rolex 24 once again. He was really solid when he ran for Lexus a couple years ago, back in 2019 or 2020. I think Kyle Busch running with Trackhouse would be absolutely amazing. Kyle Busch is still a really good road course racer and always runs up front in road courses. And then you got to look at someone else. And I think this one's a no-brainer. Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson being teammates with SVG and Connor Zilisch would be absolutely amazing and will work wonders. Kyle Larson is also a winner of the overall Rolex 24. He won with Chip Ganassi back in 2015 and was one of the fastest drivers in their program. I think seeing Kyle Larson get the chance at this, be teammates with 2 of the best road racers. We know Connor Zilisch respects Larson. We know that SVG respects Kyle Larson. Why not bring all 4 of these drivers together who have worked together very well in the Chevy program? Why have an all-around Chevy car with Trackhouse footing the bill? I think that'd be amazing, incredible. I kind of hope this happens nonetheless. I really think it'd be amazing for this to happen. And again, it'd just be so cool to see this, right? Where Trackhouse get the chance and opportunity to run the Rolex 24. So I think they'd be very fast, very competitive, and really quick if they do in the future get a chance to run at the Rolex 24. I hope it does end up happening because I think it'd be really big for the sport if Trackhouse got to run the Rolex 24, especially if they got to run in the overall event. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about WeatherTech. I did a video on this already today, but it was confirmed that WeatherTech will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilisch in 2025. It was confirmed they'll sponsor him for 36 races throughout the 2024 season. The first time to see WeatherTech on the car will be at the Busch Light Clash at Bowman Gray in early February. It was confirmed exactly how many races each are going to get. I'd have to imagine that Shane Van Gisbergen is probably going to get the sponsorship for around 20 to 22 races, and Connor is probably going to get around 14 to 15 races. Because I do believe that Connor has Carolina Carports also as a sponsor for 2025. That hasn't been officially confirmed, but I think Carolina Carports will sponsor Connor Zilisch in 2025. This is not a major shock or surprise. WeatherTech has been working with SVG so far this year in 2024, and he's won twice with the WeatherTech sponsorship. One at Sonoma and also one at the Chicago Street Course. And we've seen WeatherTech stock grow up and grow in major ways because of the success that SVG has been majorly having. And I think having the sponsorship like this, one of the biggest companies be really committed out there with a driver like SVG and Connor is really huge. You think about both these drivers going into next year. Shane Van Gisbergen, who's shown so much improvement on ovals throughout the 2024 season, just finished 15th at Talladega Superspeedway. And he had a chance to win a couple other cup races. He could have won at Watkins Glen not too long ago. Was very fast at Watkins Glen. And he's gotten better on ovals in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He got a top 10 at Kansas, finished in a top 10 at Darlington. He's gotten a couple top 5s throughout the year. He's been pretty fast on the ovals. And we know going into next year that SVG is going to be a major threat and contender on road courses in 2025. And then you think about Connor Zilisch. He's joining a very elite lineup at Junior Motorsports. He's been working with Justin Allgaier, Sammy Smith, and also Carson Quaffle. And having that sponsorship on board with the Trackhouse family is very huge. Connor, there's a lot of hype around him. He's very good at every type of track, not just the road courses where he's been super dominant, but he's also very strong on the ovals as well. And I do think that Connor is going to be super, super strong and super competitive when we do go racing next year. But I think it's pretty amazing and huge to see that WeatherTech is going to be continuing their partnership with the Trackhouse Racing family in 2025. Now, could we maybe see in the future Project 91 come into play? We do see something like that happen. That is possible. And maybe something cool that could happen is Red Bull come into play. I think considering that both of the drivers are part of the Red Bull family with the partnerships they've got, I think it'd be pretty cool to see Red Bull work with both of the drivers going into 2025 in a bigger party. I think pretty exciting stuff for sure. It's just cool to see WeatherTech coming in and working with both these drivers. I think it's a really amazing story for sure and pretty awesome and great to see that WeatherTech is coming on and working both drivers going to 2025. Excited for both of the guys, and I think it's amazing and great to see that WeatherTech will get to work with SVG and Connor Zilic. I expect the sponsorship to get victories with both of the drivers throughout the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2311 Racing lawsuit once again. Now remember earlier this week, it was confirmed that both 2311 Racing, Michael Jordan, and Farmer Motorsports are sending NASCAR into a lawsuit when it comes to antitrust. And this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that came out in regards to details. Now, Denny Hamlin spoke to the media on Saturday morning and says he remains focused on the championship. And he says that all this stuff going on behind his scenes, that would focus on the higher-ups and executives in basically his organization that do a lot of this stuff, including Jeffrey Kessler, who is running the lawyer stuff. My focus is to win a NASCAR Cup Series championship. Continuing on the media availabilities, Jordan Bianchi had asked him a question in regards to 2311 Racing. He said, do you think that all the stuff that you've done in the sport, you've done enough to invest? Do you think they appreciate what you've done? And Denny Hamlin basically gave a very quick remark by saying, no, I don't think. And he was not very happy by the question he was asked. Now, right before the media availabilities happened, we started seeing Bob Pockers ask owners questions in regards to the charter agreement. And Richard Childress reveals that he did not have a choice to sign it. He actually kind of confirmed what Denny Hamlin and the people in the lawsuit had pretty much said by basically saying that they were given the document at 6:37 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And they were told they had to sign it by midnight. Otherwise, they were going to get all their charters revoked and everything was going to be gone. And Richard pretty much confirmed and said, I did not have a choice but to sign it. I've got hundreds of points that are at this organization that are working. I don't want to affect all the team's livelihoods. I had no choice but to sign the lawsuit. And he also kind of confirmed he is not planning to get involved with the lawsuit, like many other owners that we'll talk about a little bit are not really planning to get involved. Now, Kyle Larson and many other drivers also spoke on the lawsuit this weekend, and Kyle Larson said that they're basically, the driver salaries have gone down, and he feels like we're the only sport that has gone down in salaries. We've seen the MLB go up a lot. We've seen the NBA go up. We have seen the NFL go up when it comes to driver salaries. It's kind of wild to see that we're really the only sport out there that driver salaries have decreased instead of increased. Back in the early 2010s and the late 2000s, driver salaries was in the $10 to $15 million range. Curtis Polk said that the average driver in the Cup Series is only getting $3 million a year currently at the moment. Some of the drivers like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch are probably still making around $10 million, but a lot of the newer drivers are not making as much money as they used to make. Brad Keselowski, after qualifying, had concluded. He also spoke to Bob by basically saying, I'm not really going to get involved in it too much. I'll keep my opinions to myself. But he has said that if it's going to make the sport a lot better, he's definitely in for it. Michael McDowell also commented on the situation because Michael McDowell did win his 5th straight pole on a super speedway, and he coursed his drive for front row. He says the only comment that he got taken back by when it came to this is he basically said that Larry McReynolds' comment around the fact that basically front row has been an uncompetitive team. He didn't agree with that. He said front row has been very, very competitive. And he had some very interesting comments on other parts of it as well. Now, it was reported also when the Trackhouse WeatherTech announcement had happened, Justin Marks spoke on the situation as well by saying, I'm going to keep my opinions to myself. I'm not really going to say much. Then, according to what was reported, Jim France was spotted right before the race had taken place. Jordan Bianchi and multiple reporters tried to get comment basically from him, and he basically did not acknowledge him, said he had no comment on the lawsuit going on at the moment, but he basically said that he's really excited for the race and the championship, not really acknowledging the situation. And Michael Jordan also spoke to the media, and he said that he's positive about how things are going. He said that we want to make the sport fair for everybody, and he wants things to work out for the fans overall and the drivers overall, where he wants to make it fair for everybody. This lawsuit, 100%, is the biggest news story in NASCAR we probably have ever had. You've got Michael Jordan, Curtis Polk, Denny Hamlin, Farmer Motorsports, Bob Jenkins, all going off after NASCAR and suing them for a lot of, really not just for money, because we heard tonight on the Teardown that they're not really after money. What they are after is helping the sport grow and basically a little bit more control in the sport. For me, I want to see everyone work together. I don't want to see NASCAR lose all control of the sport, but I think they've got way too much power and way too much in their hands. And this story is just going to get crazier and crazier and crazier as time progresses and goes on. And I think that there's going to be a lot more information about this. It is going to come out even this week. I bet you Denny Hamlin's going to talk about it on Actions Detrimental later today. It's going to be very interesting to see how things play out as time progresses and goes on. But I think it's wild that more information continues to come out. And it's wild also that Rich Troll said they only had a day to sign it. If this goes to court, which apparently they will be going after their injunction on a couple days from now, we'll see how it plays out. But the lawsuit continues on, and everyone that's involved with it will be interested to see how things progress as they go forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about JTG Daugherty Racing. Now, JTG Daugherty Racing was able to pick up the victory earlier today at Talladega Superspeedway. But earlier this evening, Matt Weaver wrote out an article in regards to JTG Daugherty Racing's future. And he confirmed something that we've been hearing. Tad and Jody Scheckter are no longer working in the ownership group at JTG Daugherty Racing, and they are now officially working at Joe Gibbs Racing. This is definitely very interesting, but it also continues to get very interesting in this same article because it doesn't seem like Tad and Jody Scheckter are working with the Kroger family or the Kroger brand anymore, because it sounds like Kroger will not be going to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2025. And instead, they're going to be headed over to RFK Racing in 2025, as RFK Racing in the next couple months is expected to announce that they will be a 3-car program in 2025. Brad Keselowski will be the driver of the 6 car once again. Chris Buescher will be in the 17. So who's going to get the 3rd seat for RFK? Could it be Zane Smith? Could it be someone else like Hailie Deegan, for example? It's not going to be none of those drivers. The driver that's expected to get the 3rd seat at RFK Racing in 2025 is Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece had a previously working relationship with Kroger in the past, and they really liked that relationship. And obviously, a lot of people in the industry, including myself, do believe that Ryan Preece really has not gotten the fair shake that he has absolutely deserved. Ryan Preece is a very talented race car driver. Say what you want to say. The guy has won multiple NASCAR Xfinity Series races for teams like Joe Gibbs Racing. And he also, of course, has won some wheel and modified championships. And also when he drove in the Truck Series for DGR Racing when they were a Ford organization, when he had drivers like Taylor Gray, Tanner Gray, and Hailie Deegan drive for the team, he won a couple races at Nashville Superspeedway. And he's not been driving for the best organizations. JTG Daugherty Racing has had not a lot of success. Yes, they've gotten a couple wins with Stenhouse, but they haven't had a ton of success in the NASCAR Cup Series at this point. And then, of course, you think about Ryan Preece at SHR. He joined the worst SHR organization out there. The 41 car has not been great since Kurt Busch had driven behind the wheel in 2018. And overall, they just were struggling. We know SHR shutting down. The first year he joined up with SHR, guess what? That team failed to go to victory lane. So I think it definitely makes a lot of sense for him to get a top-tier opportunity. And I think having him in a good seat is great. And you think about this. This is the last of the 4 drivers that need to sign for next year. Noah Grayson's going to front row, most likely the number 4 car, because they're probably bringing the 4 car into front row next year, who we'll talk about here in just a little bit. You've got Josh Berry going to the 21 for the Wood Brothers, and Chase Briscoe at the 19. Joining up with RFK Racing, one of the fastest growing Ford organizations, I think is absolutely huge for the team and the brand. Now, what does this mean for JTG Daugherty Racing going forward? Well, obviously, Gordon Smith and Brad Daugherty are working as higher-up owners of the team. And something interesting to note, it looks like Ernie Cope, who used to be a crew chief for Kevin Harvick Incorporated and a former driver, I believe, back in the day, It says he's part of the ownership group as well, which is very interesting. Now, we don't know exactly what the name will be for JTG Doherty. It might be just Doherty Racing or G Doherty Racing or something like that going into next, or maybe Smith Doherty Racing or something like that. Maybe Junior Motorsports gets involved. We don't know at this point right now. But nonetheless, I look at this team going into next year, and I think Ryan Preece going over to RFK is a no-brainer at this point. He's bringing the Kroger sponsorship. He's bringing the funding. And I think Ryan Preece, if he does end up over at RFK, which it sounds very likely at this point that it is going to happen, I think Ryan Preece will have a very solid and good year next season. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens for sure. It sucks that JG's going over the brand. I know we kind of have to talk about this with him picking up the win, but it's still a really big deal for the organization nonetheless, that there'll be some big changes coming, and we'll see how it ends up playing out and see how things end up working out. But there's some big changes coming over to the JTG Doherty Racing Group for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out for this team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. Now, it was reported by Kelly Grandel and multiple reporters in the industry that 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports are both still expected to expand to 3-car organizations in 2025, despite the lawsuits that are currently ongoing at the moment. We already knew that Front Row Motorsports, of course, would be expanding to a 3-car operation for 2025. Noah Grayson, of course, will be going over to Front Row for the 2025 season. And we also know that Todd Gillen is going to be driving full-time, most likely, in the number 38 car next year. Now, the big question is, who is going to be the third driver of the Front Row organization for 2025? There have been a lot of talk about Chandler Smith being a front runner for this team for the 2025 season, but right now the favorite to drive the third front row seat for 2025 is Zane Smith. Zane Smith has worked with Front Row Motorsports multiple times in the past and has had a lot of success in the past as well with Front Row. He won the 2022 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series Championship with the team and organization, and while it was a down year in 2023, he still won a couple races early in the year at Daytona and Circuit of the Americas. So that definitely makes a lot of sense for them to bring him back into the team and organization. Obviously not going back to the Trackhouse family for 2025. They're having talk about maybe going to McAnally Hilgeman for next year, but it looks like Zane Smith is going to be working with Front Row in 2025. But confirming the lawsuit as well, it was also noted that 2311 Racing will also be expanding to a 3-car operation in 2025. Bubba will also stay in the number 23 car for 2311, as that was confirmed about a month or so ago. And Tyler Reddick, who has a long-term contract with 2311 Racing, he'll be driving the number 45 car in 2025. We also know they're expected to have a 4th car on a part-time basis for 2025. Mark Truex Jr. is expected to run the Daytona 500 with Cole Pearn as a crew chief, either in the 56 or the number 78 car for next year. They're also expecting maybe have Corey Heim make some select NASCAR Cup Series starts. Maybe Carlos Kurt Busch could also get a chance because they've been rumored at points as well. But who's the front runner for the 3rd full-time seat? Corey Heim? That could be a definite possibility, but the driver that is most likely to get the 3rd seat for 2311 in 2025 is Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst's name has been brought up as the main candidate for this 3rd seat going into 2025. We know they're expected to acquire from Stewart Haas Racing, which of course Riley Herbst currently drives for Stewart Haas Racing full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And Riley's had some success with SHR this year. He's gotten 2 wins in his career, including a win earlier this year at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And we know Denny Hamlin had tweeted out about Riley Herbst saying impressive. Now, if you compare Riley Herbst and Corey Heim, if I had to make a choice on who get the C, I personally would be going with Corey Heim over Riley Herbst. I think Riley Herbst is a talented driver, and in the Select Cup Series starts, he's shown some stuff for sure. But I do think when you look at talent-wise, Riley Herbst is not as talented as Corey Heim. Corey Heim has 11 Truck Series wins at just the age of 22 years old. And I feel like if both drivers had to go up against each other in the same seat, I think Corey Heim would outperform Riley Herbst. The problem is that Corey Heim doesn't have as much money as Riley Herbst does. And that unfortunately puts him in a bad position because in this sport, you need funding and sponsorship. And we have heard and noted that they're bringing a lot of funding and sponsorship from the Herbst family. They're helping in a big way when it comes to the funding. So that's why most likely Riley Herbst is going to get the seat. Now, we are also expected to see 2311 Racing get granted an injunction in the next couple days. It was noted on the teardown earlier this evening that they are expected to try out for that injunction, I believe, on October 8th, which is tomorrow. So we're expected to see that come into play. And if they're granted that injunction, everything should be good to go. They could be an open team for next year if this injunction isn't granted. But Riley Herbst sounds very likely to be the driver of this team for 2025. What does this mean for the rest of the silly season? Well, obviously, there's not really many more cup rides open. RFK is expected to pick up Preece for 2025. And obviously, Riley Herbst doesn't have a ton of options if he was to go to Xfinity if this falls through. Obviously, Haas factory team set for next year, Sam Mayer and Sheldon Creed. They're going to be the drivers of the respective rides for 2025. And it's also expected that there's some other big stuff coming for Xfinity. So the rides are becoming very limited very quickly. And also on the Rick Ware side, you've obviously got Corey LaJoie not being officially confirmed at this moment in point. Corey LaJoie is, of course, expected to be full-time with Rick Ware next year. He's been performing pretty good with Rick Ware the first few races so far, though Justin Haley outperformed him today at Talladega. I'd have to think going into next year, Corey LaJoie is going to get that seat. And this is going to be very interesting to see how 2311 works. They feel like they're distracted at the moment with the lawsuit, and the lawsuit is going to be playing a major role on a lot of decisions that are going to be happening in the sport going into the future. So, nonetheless, going to be very interesting to see what happens in regards to this kind of stuff. We already talked about Carl Levers maybe be interested in coming back to NASCAR. Denny says that 2311 does have a car ready for him just in case he decides to come back, which I would love to see Carl Levers make a return, but I'm not exactly sure if Carl will make that return if they get the chance. So we'll see what happens going forward with 2311. But like I said, they are expected to expand to a 3-car operation for the 2025 season, which I find to be very intriguing and very exciting nonetheless. So we'll see what happens in regards to that. I kind of hope it does happen where they are granted that injunction so they can have all the charters, even though they're not going to have a charter technically. They're still going to have a charter, but this lawsuit has major implications and major roles going into the future. So we'll see what happens in regards to that and see how things play out. But it does look like, nonetheless, that 2311 Racing will officially be expanding to a 3-car operation as they've entered a bidding to get a charter for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season, with most likely Riley Herbst getting that charter for next year. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts on today's episode. Who do you think gets the 3rd seat for 2311? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what happens at JTG Doherty Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, because I've got some stuff going on, there'll most likely be a silly season update dropping. And then, of course, on Wednesday, be a NASCAR news video along with the Xfinity Series race picks. If any major news breaks throughout the day, including updates to the lawsuit, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. I've got the Charlotte Roval coming up, which also is really exciting. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.